also a fan inside here. That really helps to move air around underneath here, especially because you need cooling for your DDR5 as well as SSDs. Now, to get this cover off, there are 3 screws. One of them you can use almost any screwdriver to be able to do that way. But the other 2 are kind of recessed, and they sit so far down in here. Second M2, you can do that. The one thing I'll point out though is that the cooling for these is interesting because remember that we had this heatsink here. There are thermal pads, but these thermal pads only cover a portion of the overall, SSD. And it might be really hard to see, maybe Alex can zoom in on this, but there is only a little bit of an indentation on the thermal pad from where the Ryzen controller is on the Crucial P3 Plus and where it's actually making contact with this thermal pad. And then it'll get one of the NAND chips over here, but it won't get the second one. So it's not necessarily like the best cooling solution by any means. Still, it's also better than a lot of the other solutions we've seen on the market, so I guess that is what it is. Now, the next thing we're gonna talk about is the Wi-Fi situation. This is an Intel AX200, which is kind of an older, it's a Wi-Fi 6 solution, it's not Wi-Fi 6E, and frankly, on the GTR 7 Pro, I think that should have the 210, because I think that the AX210 with Wi-Fi 6E just makes sense if you're gonna say that you have the Pro system. That should be one of the things that differentiates the Pro from the non-Pro version. Although I also think that the non-Pro version should have Wi-Fi 6E too, so I don't know what to tell you there. Still, that's a pretty darn good Wi-Fi solution. Now, on the memory side, this is where things get super interesting. We have 2 DDR5 5600 DIMMs. So these are not just simple DDR5 4800, these are the faster speed, and the system actually does take advantage of that. Overall, I think adding like a hole for the fan on the bottom of the cover, and then also just, on this thing, maybe improving the heatsink for the SSDs and making it a little easier to uninstall, right? I think those are the big points of feedback I have for the internals of the system. With that, let's put this together and look at the performance. Now, the overall performance of these new AMD Ryzen chips is absolutely awesome. Something that you'll see is that folks really want to see the comparison between the GTR 7 and GTR 7 Pro and that Ryzen 9 to Ryzen 7. The AMD Ryzen 9 7940HS is clearly faster than the lower end model, which makes a lot of sense. The one thing that we were a little bit surprised of though is that the Beelink GTR 7 Pro is actually a little bit faster than the Minis Forum UM790 Pro, even though they use the same processor. When we did do our testing, and we'll show you in a little bit, the Beelink unit does use a little bit more power, and so I think that the power is applied more aggressively in the Beelink unit, and that is the reason that you are getting a little bit more performance for the exact same, CPU and stuff. And it's not just CPU performance. Let's take a look at the League of Legends results, and you're gonna see that our 1080 gaming is absolutely awesome. You're way above something like 140 FPS, so you can go run 144 Hz monitors, and your FPS are gonna at least stay up to that rate. 1080 is no problem on a system like this, even with all settings on pretty high. Moving to 4K, you're not gonna maintain over 144 FPS, but you're definitely gonna stay well over 60 FPS, most likely over 70, and in that 70 to 100 FPS range. Those are great results, and they're primarily due to the RDNA 3 graphics engine that's in this APU. Now, you can go look up a ton of benchmarks online for this, but the quick summary is that the new RDNA 3 graphics that's in this generation of processor is fast enough to really replace a lot of the lower end discrete GPUs that were in previous systems. That lowers a lot of power consumption and also allows you to get that smaller footprint. Another way to think of it though is it's somewhat like the Asus ROG Ally Z1 Extreme, and it's just a higher power version of that because, well, we have better cooling because it's a desktop. Although I will say that the GTR 7 makes a much better desktop PC, but if you want something portable, I do think that these handhelds are pretty good. Okay, so for the power consumption, let's start out with the first one, which is really just plugging in the included power adapter. This thing is now idle at the Windows 11 Pro desktop, but I'll just kind of show you this real quick. I'll even lift it up. Let's see if we can do this. But the idle power consumption is somewhere in that like 8 to 10, maybe 11 watt range, which is not too bad at all. And I just want to let you hear this real quick. This thing is whisper quiet at idle. Okay, now we're gonna stress the CPU, and I'll let you hear this in a second, but the big thing about this system that's different from a lot of the other systems that we've tested is just what happens to the power consumption. The packaged TDP goes into that like 65-ish watt range, and it just kind of sits there. A lot of mini PCs end up throttling down, but that is not the case with this one. And something else that we'll just kind of show you real quick is just, let's show you the overall power consumption. You can see that we're about 94, 95 watts maximum here, which is not too bad, but it's also getting darn close to 100 watts. And let me just kind of let you hear this thing real quick. It's definitely louder, but most folks are not gonna run this at 100%, and they're also not gonna have it like sitting a couple inches from their ear. It's most likely gonna be about a meter away on a desk or maybe behind a TV or something like that. Now, something that we showed in the GTR 7 one is that you can power this with an eGPU chassis and also USB power delivery that way, but let's just kind of do a normal USB power delivery, and we have our little power meter here, and I'm gonna let you just kind of sit there and see this. We also tried this with USB power delivery, and we found that the front port did not accept the power input, but both of the units on the back, you could actually just go, you could plug this in, and you'd start seeing the system light up. I think it's time now for some key lessons learned. Okay, so what did we learn out of this whole thing? First off, I think that if this is your only desktop and this is like the system you're gonna use, then I can definitely see spending a little bit more and getting the Pro version over the non-Pro version. There is that performance bump, and it is a nice performance bump, and especially since you can't go like put a GPU in here, I would say that that's definitely worth it to me. I think that changing out like the bottom cover of these to add that hole, I think is a good thing that they're doing, but that internal cover definitely needs to be a little bit better, and this should also have Wi-Fi 6E. Now, comparing the Beelink GTR 7 Pro to the Minis Forum UM790, I have to say this, guys. I actually now prefer the Beelink unit. Now, without a doubt, the Beelink is bigger. You can clearly see that here, but with the bigger chassis, you can also run all day at higher power levels, and that frankly gives you more performance, and that's something that we saw when we looked at the performance of these two units side by side. I still think, however, if Beelink made it like, another little bit taller and they could make it like completely silent, I think that would be a huge win. I think that's really the next frontier for Beelink. Also, there's always just kind of weird quality things, right? Like an example, especially is like this with the GTR, where there is a GTR, there's not a GTR, there is a GTR, there were GTRs. Like why does this orange one just not have any GTR markings on it? But there are other things like this clear CMOS button that should not be there. Please fix this, Beelink. This is silly that it's even around still. And then this bottom, like this new power thing, I think this is a cool idea, but it's not executed well, and nobody wants a proprietary power adapter. You want something that you can go get a replacement for even a couple years down the road. Now, these systems are far from perfect, and I do generally prefer them to the Minis Forum, but the Minis Forum at least offers a bare bones, which I wish Beelink would do as well. The other thing though is that I use the GTR 5 every single day as a living room PC, but at the same time, in that use case, I don't know if I would spend the premium to get the GTR 7 Pro versus the normal GTR 7. In fact, I think personally, I would rather have the GTR 7 and save that extra money up for things like spending money on a 10 gig NIC, or maybe just saving up for another generation a couple years from now. Of course, if you want to see our reviews of the GTR 7, the UM790 Pro, or you just want to see our more detail on the reviews, we have links to those in the description, including the main site review for this. Hey guys, I hope you like this look at the Beelink GTR 7 Pro. This is an awesome little system, and it's really made possible by all of you watching out there, so thank you so much. If you did like this video, well, could you share it with some of your friends? Maybe also give it a like, click subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you can see whenever we come out with great new videos. As always, thanks for watching. Have an awesome day.